I thought I was wiring our baby's nursery for peace of mind. What I caught on the monitor instead was my pregnant wife calling another man lover. Tuesday nights always had this frantic energy about them, but the second Tuesday of the month? That was in a league of its own. That's when my local community club met, started at 6:30 sharp and usually ran late into the night. Most times I wouldn't get back home until close to midnight. Emma, my wife of 4 years, always understood, but that didn't mean there weren't a few last-minute things she needed me to handle before I bolted out the door. The timing was always tight. I'd usually pull into the driveway around 5 o'clock, sometimes 5:30 if traffic had it out for me. Thankfully, dinner wasn't something I had to worry about. Emma's dinner was covered at the meeting. But still, every time there was something. A box that needed lifting, a light bulb to swap out, or just something she didn't want to leave for later. Now, to be fair, a lot of the chaos was on me. Emma was 3 months pregnant, and in her words, her hormones were off the charts. And maybe they were, but to me she was even more stunning now than the day I married her. That whole pregnancy glow people talk about? Yeah, it was real. Emma was 5'3" with this perfectly balanced figure, around 110 pounds, soft light brown hair that always smelled like lavender, and the most incredible blue eyes I'd ever seen. Just looking at her made it tough to leave the house, even for one evening. And it wasn't just about her looks. Emma was sharp, hilarious in this dry-wit kind of way, and one of the most perceptive people I'd ever known. But hey, the fact she turned heads didn't hurt either. That night, I had to be out the door by 6:10 if I wanted to make it on time. So I sprinted through a quick shower, threw on some slacks and a sports shirt, grabbed my briefcase and hustled into the kitchen on my way to the garage. Emma was standing at the sink, rinsing off the dishes. I snuck up behind her, kissed the back of her neck and wrapped my arms around her waist to keep her steady. That little neck kiss always made her melt a bit. She'd go weak in the knees and I loved being the one who did that to her. Temptation tugged at me hard as I glanced back at her one last time. Honestly, skipping the meeting crossed my mind. Not just because I wanted more time with her, but also because I was knee-deep in a little side project in the garage. I'd been wiring a baby monitor system for what would soon be the nursery, and I was maybe 30 minutes away from finishing. Emma always made a big deal about the small stuff I did. She never failed to offer those sweet, over-the-top compliments that made me feel like a hero, even if it was just screwing in a wall mount. I'd be lying if I said I didn't eat that up a little. I mean, come on, I'm a guy. We like a good ego boost now and then. I slid into the car, hit the garage door remote and started the engine. The soft hum filled the space as I double-checked I had everything. Briefcase, phone, calculator, notebook. Check, check, check. I backed out slowly, giving one last wave to Emma, who had moved to the window above the sink. She smiled and waved back, her silhouette glowing in the warm light of our kitchen. Just as I reached the end of the driveway before I could shift into gear or even close the garage door, my phone rang. I paused, everything momentarily on hold. I picked up the call and answered, "Hello?" while turning to wave at Emma again, but she was already gone from the window. And then I heard the voice on the other end. "Gary?" It said. "Glad I caught you." "I caught you just in time," the voice said. "No meeting tonight." It was Mark, our club's vice chair. Patrick's been called out of town last minute and Everett and James too. So, with the president, treasurer and secretary all gone, we figured it was best to just cancel this month's meeting altogether. Nothing scheduled unless you've got something urgent. I didn't. Honestly, I was more than a little relieved. It had been a long day, and the idea of sitting in a meeting room for hours suddenly seemed like torture compared to a quiet night at home. So I threw the car in reverse and pulled right back into the garage. Funny thing, I noticed Emma's face never showed up in the kitchen window again after I waved goodbye. That told me she probably hadn't realized I hadn't left. Which meant I had a rare opportunity to surprise her later. Our house was a modest 3-bedroom rambler, cozy but spread out just enough that if Emma wasn't in the kitchen, she wouldn't have heard me drive back in. Once the garage door closed behind me, I stayed in the car for a few minutes just taking a breath. No rush now. No meeting. No clock ticking. I figured I'd order a pizza and take the evening easy. No point in asking Emma to cook, and I didn't feel like making anything myself. It sounded like the perfect excuse to finally wrap up the project I'd been working on in the garage. The nursery baby monitor system was almost done. Everything inside the baby's room was already wired and mounted. The camera had been in place for 10 days, and Emma hadn't noticed a thing. It was one of those ultra-compact models I'd scored from a friend who was upgrading his gear. Emma had once mentioned how helpful a monitor would be for checking on the baby during naps without having to walk back and forth, and I ran with the idea. And being the overachiever I sometimes pretend not to be, I didn't stop with just the nursery. I had gone ahead and wired sound monitors into all the rooms of the house. Why not, right? If we were doing this, I wanted to do it right. The main controls were in our bedroom, but since I spent so much time tinkering in my workshop, I had set up a second control center right there in the garage. Old school TV for the visual feed, a few repurposed speakers for audio. It wasn't high-end, but it worked, and it gave me flexibility to check in on the baby from practically anywhere in the house. That night, my goal was simple: get the last few connections finalized and test everything. Once that was done, I'd have the whole system ready to show off. Emma was always so good about appreciating the little things I did. Even something simple like this? She'd light up, and honestly, I lived for that. I figured if I hustled, I could knock it out and still have time to crash in front of the TV for the night, or better yet, crash with Emma. Yeah, that sounded even better. I slipped out of the car and went straight to work. It took maybe 20 minutes to tie up the last of the loose ends, just a few tweaks, tightening some wires, adjusting the video feed, and making sure everything was powering up the way it should. Once that was done, I started cycling through the different room feeds, testing out the audio controls. I'd built it so that each speaker could be toggled on or off individually, or all of them could run through the system at once. Everything was finally starting to fall into place. I had 5 little speakers rigged up above my workspace in the garage, all angled just right over my corner of the bench. One by one, I checked them, starting with the living room feed. To my surprise, every single one worked like a charm. In fact, they were almost too good. As I flipped through them, I could hear the sound of running water, and then Emma humming softly in the shower. She was in the master bathroom, doors closed, but the mic still picked it up clear as day. Feeling satisfied, I flipped the switch that fed all the sound lines into the garage system at once. A soft buzz filled the space as all the speakers kicked in, and I got back to wiring the video monitor. I just started tightening the final connection when I heard a voice cut through one of the feeds. It was Emma, her voice floating in from the living room channel. She was on the phone. Out of instinct, I reached up and turned the volume up just a touch, more to test clarity than anything else. "Roger, it's me," I heard her say, her voice smooth and playful. "If you can make it here by 7, then we're on, lover." I froze. My hands stopped moving. My brain took a second to catch up. "Lover?" There was a pause, and then a low male voice replied, "Okay, love. I'll be there. Don't you dare be late, we've got barely enough time as it is." Emma giggled, and then said something that twisted my stomach. "And no," she added, teasing, "don't expect a repeat. You're lucky you're getting this at all." They laughed softly together, and then the call ended. I stared at the speaker like it had just slapped me. What the hell had I just heard? Roger? The only Roger I could think of was Roger Jenkins. Big guy. Always cracking jokes, kind of a lovable goofball. His wife, Crystal, was Emma's best friend. They'd been college roommates and stayed close ever since. We'd all hung out dozens of times. Backyard barbecues, birthdays, even weekends away. I liked Roger. Trusted him. Thought he was one of the good ones. My stomach twisted. Was it that Roger? I tried to shake it off, tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a different Roger. Maybe I misunderstood. But deep down I already knew. Still dazed, I wandered back to the bench, mind racing, hands moving on autopilot as I finished wiring up the monitor. I thought maybe I'd order a pizza, wrap up the night early, surprise Emma upstairs. That was the plan until the doorbell rang. It hadn't even been 10 minutes. I heard the front door open. Then Emma's voice, soft but brimming with something I hadn't heard in a long time, desire. "I've had the hardest time waiting," she whispered. "Come in, Roger. We've got until 10:30, and until then I'm all yours." My heart didn't just break, it went numb. I was sitting there in that worn-out recliner in the corner of the garage, surrounded by wires and tools and the dumb baby monitor I'd spent 2 weeks putting together. For us. For the family I thought we were building. For the woman I thought I knew. That's when I noticed something on the screen. The monitor in the nursery flickered to life. The door opened slowly. Emma stepped in first. Then came Roger, that Roger, right behind her. She led him with this soft, knowing touch. Her hand pressed against his chest, gently guiding him toward the far side of the bed I had just finished setting up for our baby. The bedding was freshly made, the soft blue lamp still glowing in the corner. Emma looped around to the opposite side of the bed, standing right in front of the closet doors. She was staring across the mattress at him, eyes locked. The camera caught her face perfectly. She was wearing that pale lavender lingerie I had bought her for Valentine's Day last year. The same one she'd modeled for me once, and never wore again. And now, here she was standing in our unborn child's nursery in that same lace and silk, lifting her hand slowly, curling one finger at Roger, beckoning him toward her. I couldn't hear anything through the nursery feed just yet, but I didn't need to. Roger's face came into view as he moved around the bed, and even he looked stunned. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but all that came out was a choked, "Emma? I thought I'd be spending tonight with you," Roger murmured, his voice thick with something that made my skin crawl. "But this is more than I expected. You look amazing, Emma. Absolutely stunning." That was when it hit me. Really hit me. They were both undressing. My breath caught in my chest. My thoughts, frozen just moments before, started racing. It felt like waking from a nightmare I hadn't realized I was dreaming. And then I heard her voice, firm but soft. "No, Roger," she said quietly. "I meant what I told you. Just this once. That's all. Just one time. Because of our deal, and maybe," she hesitated, "for old time's sake." "Sure," Roger replied, his voice smooth, like he was already preparing to push his luck. "Just once. I get it. But maybe someday when you start thinking about how good it felt, maybe you'll want more. We could try again. No pressure. Just a thought." There was another kiss, loud, wet, too familiar. Then I heard his footsteps moving away toward the front of the house. Emma didn't say much. Just these soft little sounds, half sighs, half whispers. But I could hear something in them, annoyance, impatience, maybe even guilt. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 11 o'clock. And I was still sitting there, alone in the shadows of my garage, the blue light from the monitor flickering faintly against my workbench. My chest ached. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my wife, our child-to-be, it all felt like it had crumbled into dust. I didn't know where we were going from here. I didn't know what was salvageable, if anything. All I knew was the hollowness spreading in my chest, a heartbreak I couldn't even name. Thoughts crashed into me like waves. Some of them were sympathetic. I tried to justify what Emma had done, tried to tell myself maybe this was just a misstep, a moment of weakness. But just as quickly, another part of me would answer those thoughts with anger, with the question I couldn't avoid. What did I do wrong? What made her need someone else? What was I not giving her? It was past midnight before I moved again. I stood slowly, my body heavy, and shut down the monitors. The hum of electricity died down, and the silence felt unbearable. I walked back into the house. Everything was quiet. Emma was asleep. I went into the bedroom, opened my drawer, and dug beneath a pile of old sweaters. There, in a plain paper bag, folded like it still held a secret, was the lingerie set I'd given her last Valentine's Day. She'd worn it once for me. What? And now it was ruined. I held it up, noting how the panties were still damp in the center. The memory of what I'd seen twisted in my gut. The next morning I called into work and begged for the day off. I told my boss I was dealing with something personal. He didn't ask questions. I think he could hear it in my voice. Once alone, I sat down and played back the tape from the monitor. I had recorded everything the night before, though at the time I hadn't planned to go back and watch it. I just wanted to make sure the setup worked. At first, I skipped through the footage, couldn't bear to watch it all again. But slowly, against my better judgment, I found myself watching more closely. And that's when I started noticing the details I'd missed. The expressions. The hesitation. The way Emma looked at him, then quickly looked away. It didn't make it hurt less, but it did make it complicated. Later that afternoon, she found me in the nursery. I had turned the monitor system on and was making adjustments, trying to distract myself. Emma walked in and smiled. "Gary," she said, lighting up, "this is perfect. When did you finish this?" "Just this afternoon," I lied. "Got everything working last night, actually." She gave me a puzzled look, like she was trying to work out how I had managed to finish all this without her noticing. Her smile faltered just for a second. "Last night?" she asked. I nodded. "There's one more thing I want to show you," I said, standing up and taking her hand. She followed me out into the garage. "I spend a lot of time out here," I told her, keeping my voice even. "So I figured it made sense to set up a second monitoring station, one I could use while I'm working. You know, to keep an eye on the baby when you're out running errands or something." She nodded, but her eyes were searching mine now. She looked uneasy, like her mind was slowly putting something together. I flipped on the garage setup, the speakers, the old TV wired into the feed. The screen buzzed to life. Emma didn't say anything at first. Then, in a voice almost too quiet to hear, she said, "Gary, this goes back to college. There was a promise I made." "It was one night," she said, barely above a whisper. "A stupid promise I made to Roger. Back in college." I stayed quiet, just watching her, heart pounding in my chest. "How many years ago did you make that promise, Emma?" She sighed, eyes searching mine. Gary, it wasn't like that. We were drunk. Back then Roger and I were kind of a thing. Nothing serious, but we were dating. He was this good-looking, confident guy, and for a little while I thought maybe he was the one. People assumed we were more serious than we were, but the truth is, I was never sure. And he never really pressured me. For all the reputation he had, being some kind of ladies' man, he never pushed for anything. And this was how long ago? 6 years, she said quietly. Right before I moved in with Crystal. She looked away and her voice softened. That night, this promise we're talking about, it became this running joke between Roger and me. A silly little thing that was never supposed to matter. Emma swallowed hard before going on. 2 weeks ago, when we told Crystal and Roger about the pregnancy, we were out in their garage, Roger and I. He was showing me some issue with his truck. Crystal and I had been inside chatting before that. And after I stepped away, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "So I guess that promissory note is due now." My stomach turned. She knew? I asked. Emma nodded, clearly still stunned by it herself. I don't know how. I was shocked. But she said it like it was something they both remembered, like it had always been part of some plan. And I didn't know how to respond. She paused, then looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. Gary, I know how insane this sounds. But somehow, in the moment, it felt like my word was on the line. Like saying no would break something that went back to who I was before you and me. I stared at her, this woman I'd loved, trusted, built a life with, kneeling in front of me, trying to justify a betrayal that felt like it had carved a hole in my chest. You're worth more to me than anything, she said, her voice shaking. More than my pride. More than my past. More than that night. I dropped my gaze to the floor. This was the woman I had planned to spend the rest of my life with. The mother of our child. My best friend. My wife. But I had to ask her the question that had been drilling into my soul since the moment I heard her say "lover" on that speaker. Emma, I asked, my voice low and raw, could you have said no? She nodded slowly. Yes, I could have. But I didn't. I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't understand, and I didn't want to lose your respect. But I also felt like I was honoring something. Something that, looking back, never should have meant anything at all. I thought if I told you, you'd never see me the same again. You were right, I whispered. She flinched. I stood there, the silence between us like a wall. Taking a deep breath, I let it out in one long exhale. 6 weeks ago, I said, do you remember that call? I was driving back from that conference and I called you from the road. Emma nodded slowly. We joked a bit, I continued. I asked if you wanted to meet me at the Holiday Inn in Erin. I told you we could make a weekend of it, just the two of us. Do a little, what did I say? Hanky-panky, I think. She smiled faintly, eyes still full of guilt. Yeah. It was a great weekend. Do you remember what you wore that night after we came back from dancing? She looked down, then whispered, my Donald Duck t-shirt. I looked at her, really looked at her. You just told me that weekend was special, I said. And yet, when you were with Roger, you wore the lingerie I bought you. The nicest thing you own. Something we shared together. You wore it for him. Not for me. Emma's mouth trembled. Gary, please, that doesn't mean what you think. It doesn't? I asked. Because to me it screams something. It screams that maybe I wasn't enough to deserve your best. But he was. She tried to speak, but no words came. You say I'm special, I went on. So tell me, Emma, how do I believe that when your actions are telling me the exact opposite? I'll do anything to prove it to you, she said desperately. Anything. Just tell me what I can do. I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked away. I don't know yet, I said softly. I really don't. I don't know where we go from here, I told Emma honestly, my voice low. But I'm not just sitting with this alone. I'm calling Roger and Crystal. Tonight. She looked up, startled. Gary, do we have to? You said Crystal already knew about this, I interrupted gently. If that's true, we need to clear the air. I need answers. And I need to hear them with everyone in the same room. Emma nodded slowly. Okay. I picked up my phone and dialed. Crystal answered on the second ring. Hey Crystal, it's Gary, I said, steadying my tone. Can you and Roger come by tonight? I think we need to talk. There was a pause on the other end, like she knew exactly what this was about. Sure, she replied. We'll be there in 20. The moment felt surreal. These were people we had shared dinners with, vacations, inside jokes. We knew how they took their coffee, what snacks they brought to game night. And now they were part of the reason I wasn't sure where my marriage was headed. By the time they arrived, I had everything set. I poured Crystal her usual glass of white wine, handed Roger his preferred Jack and Seven, though I hated wasting good whiskey on him now. I gave Emma her orange juice, because of the pregnancy, and fixed myself a gin and tonic. Or at least that's what I let it look like. It was just tonic water tonight. I needed to stay sharp. We gathered in the living room. I sat down on the ottoman in front of the couch, my hands resting on my knees, elbows out, trying to keep my posture from collapsing in on itself. I looked around at the three of them. Emma quiet and tense. Crystal trying to read the room. Roger looking almost smug. So, I started, voice calm, we've all been friends a long time. I know what each of you likes in a drink. I know what you'd order in the middle of a night like this. Everyone stayed quiet. I turned to Crystal. You know, you and Roger have built a bit of a reputation around the Key Club. Nothing obvious. Nothing anyone said out loud. But I've heard things, little comments. Crystal smiled like she'd been waiting for this moment. Roger took a sip of his drink, relaxed. Too relaxed. I went on. I used to be glad none of it was ever directed at Emma and me. But now, I'm guessing that's about to change. Crystal gave a soft laugh. Well, yeah, you're not wrong. I turned to Emma. Up until right now, I thought you knew all of this. Now I'm not so sure. Emma's brows furrowed. Knew all of what? Roger leaned back and said it casually like he was talking about weekend plans. This wasn't just a one-night thing, Emma, he said. We meant the whole weekend. Crystal and I thought you were in on it, that you were finally joining the fun. The fun? I asked, my voice sharper now. Crystal jumped in, her tone measured like she was pitching a product. Look, Gary, this isn't what you think, she said. It's actually a pretty good arrangement. We just add a little spice now and then. That's all. A bit of variety. After a few years, things get stale. It's natural. But this keeps everything alive. It keeps the love strong. I blinked at her, dumbfounded. She turned to Emma. Roger and I, our marriage hasn't lost its spark. And I think the occasional variation has helped. Keeps things exciting. No emotional entanglement. Just spice. Controlled. Safe. And we're careful, we don't take risks. We're not reckless. Emma looked completely blindsided, her orange juice trembling in her hands. Crystal. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't realize you two were. Crystal interrupted, gently but firmly. We thought you did. We assumed you were open to it. That's why I mentioned the promissory note. We thought this was your way of easing into it. The room went quiet. I looked from one face to the next. My wife. My friends. Or who I thought they were. Emma, I said, staring directly at her, do you want this? Was this night just a mistake, or is this something you've been thinking about? She shook her head slowly, eyes glistening. No, Gary. I didn't know about any of this. I didn't want it. I thought it was just fulfilling something old and stupid. I had no idea what they were expecting. And suddenly I believed her. Not because I wanted to, but because of how shaken she looked. Because Emma, for all her flaws, had never been good at lying to my face. Roger lifted his glass, smirking faintly. I'll be honest, man, he said. I didn't expect it to go this far. But I wouldn't mind if it happened again. I stood up, jaw clenched. You should leave. Crystal stood as well, sensing the shift in tone. We should probably go, she murmured. Emma sat still, looking down into her glass. They left quietly. And I stood in the living room with a hollow silence settling around me, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next with a marriage I didn't recognize anymore. I kept my eyes on our stunned friends, if you could even call them that anymore. My chest was tight and my hands felt numb, but I stayed composed. I wanted every word I said to land with precision. I feel betrayed by both of you, I said slowly, turning toward Roger and Crystal. I honestly don't know who I'm more angry at, and right now it doesn't really matter. Either way, we won't be getting together again anytime soon. Or maybe ever. No one spoke. The room felt like it had lost all its air. I walked over to the TV, powered it down, then leaned forward and ejected the USB drive from the port beneath the screen. I held it out to Emma. She took it without a word, her fingers trembling slightly. Then, without a sound, she stood, crossed the room, and picked up the day's newspaper from the coffee table. She crumpled up a few pages, stuffed them into the fireplace, and struck a match. The flame crackled as she dropped the paper in. When it caught, she added the USB drive to the fire. We both watched it burn. I didn't know if it was guilt or shame I saw in her eyes. Maybe both. You said we'd get back together, she said finally. That we'd sleep together again. I lied, I said bluntly. Her mouth parted slightly, but she didn't respond. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Tomorrow morning we're getting a paternity test for the baby. Once the results come in, if he's mine, I'll be there for the birth. I'll support my son. I looked her straight in the eyes. But we're not staying married. Tears welled up, but I didn't pause. There's more, I added. From the day he's born until he turns 10, you won't take another lover. If you do, I'll make sure whatever you contribute to society is done the hard way. You'll regret breaking that promise. She blinked, stunned. Gary? Tomorrow evening, I said, not letting her finish, we walk into the divorce lawyer's office together. We'll file. We'll keep it civil. We'll sort out custody, finances, everything. The room was silent again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. And honestly, I wasn't even sure how I kept speaking. My throat felt raw. My heart was broken in more ways than I could count. But I needed clarity. I needed to reclaim something, dignity, control, whatever was left after the trust had been torn apart. This wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding something honest in the ruins of what used to be. Eventually, I realized I couldn't carry the weight of uncertainty any longer. There was only one thing left to do. I had to talk to Albert. Directly. I needed the truth straight from him. Emma was getting ready to leave town for a few days, some work conference in another city, so I figured that would be my chance. I'd go while she was away. No distractions. No interference. When I got to the clinic where Albert worked, the waiting room was oddly quiet. No receptionist. No one in sight. That alone set off something uneasy in me. Still, I looked around, not sure if I should wait or come back later. Then something caught my eye, a coat. Hanging right there by the door. Same color, same style, exactly like Emma's. My heart jumped into my throat. I stepped closer. It was her coat. That's when I heard movement coming from a room down the hall. I walked toward the sound, slow and tense, until I reached the door. I tried the handle. Locked. Everything inside me snapped. I stepped back, planted my foot, and kicked the door. The frame cracked open on the second hit. What I saw inside made me sick. Albert. And our receptionist. She looked up, eyes wide with shock. Michael. I'm so ashamed. I stared at her like she was a stranger. Ashamed? No. You're ashamed now. My voice shook with rage. What about when you were sneaking around with him? Was that when shame kicked in? Or was it when you came home to me and lied again and again? What a fool I've been. She scrambled to cover herself. Please, Michael, forgive me. No, I said, my voice flat now. That's enough. I'm done. I'm filing for divorce. I didn't want to hear more. I didn't need any more excuses. I turned, stormed out of that place, and didn't look back. But later that day something changed. I found out she'd overdosed. The same woman who had betrayed me was now lying in a hospital bed, unconscious, alone. I should have felt justified. I should have felt like she got what was coming. But I didn't. I'm not built that way. And even though Emma had shattered everything we had, I couldn't wish that kind of pain on anyone. So I called my friend Kevin. He's a doctor. A good one. A better man than me in a lot of ways. I asked him to look out for her. I made sure she was taken care of, even though I wouldn't be around anymore. Maybe some folks will say I was too soft. That I should have walked away without looking back. But I believe in leaving with integrity. That's how I sleep at night. Letting go for me meant choosing mercy. Not for her, but for myself. I started therapy after that. I didn't think I needed it, but the weight didn't go away just because the divorce papers were signed. That's how I met Kayla. She was my therapist at first, smart, grounded, with a sadness in her that mirrored my own. Turned out, her ex-husband had done a number on her too. Two broken people. One slow, cautious connection. Kayla didn't try to fix me. She just listened. And somewhere in those quiet conversations I found peace. Maybe even something that looked a lot like hope. Thanks for listening. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Have you ever stayed silent when your heart was breaking? Would you have done the same? And hey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We've got more stories to tell. Some messy, some healing. All human. See you in the next one.